Hi again, class. Here is the second PowerPoint and audio presentation for Module 3 marketing video. And today we're talking about some services and nonprofit organizational marketing. It's a little bit different than regular marketing, but not terribly. What you want to keep in mind is that the market is pretty large. Services account for 68% of our U.S. GDP, at least in 2014. And these services include things like performances and efforts. So it's legal services, it's tax services, it's medical services, it's things like that. And I spoke about this briefly began to in the other audio, but there are these differences that distinguish a service from a product. A service is an intangible, it's inseparable, heterogeneous, and it's not perishable like a product is. It doesn't spoil. Uh, I guess one could argue that if they wanted to get really, really technical and say, well, my accountant's version of my 2015 tax statement only works for that year. It doesn't work for the next year, which is true. But in the same vein, it's intangible. Yes, you do get a particular product that should be consistent between different tax preps, and it is what it is. It's inseparable in the sense that uh, you take part in its preparation in a sense, and it's not perishable. What these end up doing is affecting the marketing of the products. I mean, of the services. These they're generally promoted or dealt with a little bit differently than products are. And components of service quality center around reliability, responsiveness, assurance, empathy, and tangibles. Um, the physical evidence of the service. This is less so online, but at the same time, there's got to be something like a mailing address or a on-site location that identifies the location of that particular entity. Like a product, you kind of have the core, instead, like I explained, core product, you've got core service, tax prep, medical, whatever the case may be, law, and then you have these complementary or supplementary services around it. Think about going in for a medical exam. You've got at the heart of it is the exam, but you have all kinds of peripheral and often independent related services like blood tests and x-rays and stuff like that. They're actually, in many cases, although they're under the umbrella of the HMO, in many cases they're operated by individual entities. And just like with products, we can try to mass customize a particular service so that we can sell it to the grand population rather than just niches, which is common with products. So that would be what H&R Block essentially does, let's say. So one of the things that we can do when we stress, and H&R Block is a good example, it has some tangible components like its many locations, many convenient locations. We can use personal information sources. We can engage in post-purchase communication. That's certainly the service component of Apple. You have a email going to you before you ever walk out of the store, and you can create a strong organization or brand image. As with products, we can have different pricing strategies. You can define the unit of consumption, like by the hour, or by the product in a minimum charge for a tax service. There's all kinds of different ways to price your product for different market segments. And you might bundle different kinds of services within your overall price strategy. So you might be, if you're an insurance company, you might have a policy that covers autos, home, life, and business. We've got three kinds of pricing strategies that we can use for services. One would be to simply price it the same for everybody, and the price is based off what we determined the cost is of providing that particular service. So we have a margin or a markup, and the difficulty in doing it for services that it's often difficult, obviously, to come up with the price per offering or per person. Operations-oriented pricing, we match supply and demand by varying the prices. So this would be an example. An example would be a hotel that has varying rates during the the course of the year through different seasons. When it's busy season, the prices go up. So you're matching the supply and demand by varying the price. Then you lower the prices in periods of lower demand so that you can pull more people in. And then finally, we have patron-oriented pricing, where you maximize the number of customers by varying the price. And that might be a sports coliseum that has different prices for different parts of the stadium based on your location. Or it might be like for a movie theater, you have a special price for senior citizens, so that not only are you cost sensitive and it's PC and all that, but you pull people out into that venue that might not otherwise go because of price. We have different kinds of nonprofit organizations: governments, museums, theaters, schools, and churches. I would offer you that there's no such thing as a nonprofit organization except maybe for government. The rest of these, they all have to make money. And so that money's got to, while they're not in the business to make big money per se, they have to make enough to cover their carrying costs. And so they have different revenue streams, including revenues that come from donations as well as revenues that come from people that utilize the facilities. But at the end of the day, those have to add up to cover all of the operating expenses, or like anything else, they can, quote, go out of business, unquote. Um, like a product, we have different marketing objectives, including first and foremost identifying our target markets, specifying the objectives that we want to accomplish, whether that be to, if it's a museum, to have a certain caliber of art come in or different artists. It might be a schedule of events uh, that we have to communicate their ability, but it's, again, you run it just like you do a business. So supply chain management and marketing channels. Uh, a supply chain basically is, we have terms like upstream and downstream, and if you think about oil, as it's pumped out of the well all the way to where it becomes gasoline, there's many steps and many players along the way in that process that add value to it along the way, and it's they all have to run in tandem in coordination with one another, and it's always the player in front of you that is supplying you with that, with their product in the step of the overall process. Then you do what you're supposed to do and you pass it up uh, to the next level until you get to the end user, which in this case of gasoline would be the person who burns that product in their automobile. And the best out of the 4Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. The most money is saved through efficient management of your supply chain system. The granddaddy of all granddaddies in that regard is Walmart. It's been imitated and emulated many times because they get right into the face of their suppliers to make sure they're running efficiently, because Walmart benefits from that directly because they want their suppliers to sell them their products as cheaply as they possibly can, and then both parties still make money. But they work with their suppliers in all directions and making sure that that supply chain management network is operating as efficiently as possible. And again, great benefits are better service and increased revenues through, primarily through operational savings. When you talk to most people, they say, "Oh, we want to cut out the middleman," but the fact is that intermediaries can perform many functional services more effectively at many times than the core business that you're talking about. And so it's important to take a look at the functions wholesalers. So when you have a wholesaler, let's say, who's kind of in the middle of the process, uh, if a business decides to cut out the middleman in order to save money, they oftentimes have to take on a different level of expertise. For example, if a manufacturer of carpeting decides they're going to have retail outlets versus just sell them to uh, wholesalers or middle people, um, they have to have salespeople, they have to have storage facilities. They take on a whole different dimension to their business, and it often further complicates the management of the business. And so before you just blanketly say, I'm going to cut out middlemen, you have to have an appreciation for what uh, the costs are associated with doing so, and understand that every company has its core competency, and as you start to add these peripheral functions, you can add costs to your operations. There are effectively 3 degrees of distribution: intensive, selective, and exclusive, and most products exist in the selective distribution. There aren't many products that you are distributed in essence everywhere. A good example is Coca-Cola. I mean, you can find it from vending machines in restrooms to, or in a building, to fountain drinks in the finest restaurants. So it's ubiquitous. But most products want to control the distribution centers that they work and sell through. To some extent, you want to have a fit with, ultimately, with the retailer that matches your particular product. You don't find Ralph Lauren shirts, for example, in Walmart, uh, because it would destroy their brand equity. You'd have to sell them cheaper, obviously, and all the people that are willing to pay a high price because of the perceived value of it would not be interested in buying anymore. And then you have exclusive distribution, which typically is associated with franchises. As far as deciding what kind of wholesaler intermediary network you're going to have, it depends a lot on the product characteristics, your buyer characteristics, and the market characteristics, if you think about it. The deciding where you're going to sell a dairy product is very different, obviously, and who you're going to deal with in actualizing uh, that product's distribution and ultimate retail is very different than, say, a Ralph Lauren shirt. Uh, this is a kind of a configuration of Walmart supply chain management, and this is an extremely simplified version. They do have hubs though, and from that hub, that distribution center, there would just be a myriad of different channels that go out to individual suppliers and their own supply chains, like Coke, let's say, or Pepsi, or Procter and Gamble, or Samsung. You get it. But you'll generally find these Walmart distribution centers in kind of rural areas out in the middle of nowhere, with the common feature that there's one in St. George, Utah. There's one up on Highway 84 where I live, toward in north central Oregon, right on the Columbia River, and they're always on a freeway, and they're always on where where there's a freeway junction generally, so you can split off into different directions, and it's almost always on a railroad track, so they can get products in from different ways in mass and then distribute them out to the retail outlets. So next time you're in St. George, Utah, which isn't far from Las Vegas, you'll see one of these huge centers sitting out in the middle of nowhere. And that's the other thing. The land is cheap out in these areas as well. This is one for Amazon, and they if uh, if Walmart was the 500-pound gorilla of supply chain management, Amazon is in the ring with them and duking it out, because really all they are is a supply distribution mechanism for buyers and sellers. They really act as a middleman, just facilitating. I mean, more and more they have distribution centers and carry product, but the majority of it is they don't really take ownership. They just facilitate a transaction. One of the big things that is enabling supply chains now to do a better job and save a lot of money is this whole issue uh, of analytics and collecting data in mass on suppliers' transactions, customers, users, and then coming up with new and different products or new and better ways to facilitate the whole process of purchase and delivery. Channel members are, again, what I mentioned earlier, are different players within the whole distribution value chain. And you want to make sure that you don't compromise relationships with one through what you do with another. So I mentioned earlier that Ralph Lauren does not sell shirts in their shirts in Walmart, and if they did, you can bet that Macy's and Nordstrom's and others would immediately stop carrying their products. So that's called channel conflict, and it's usually around issues of availability and pricing. Everybody likes, people don't want to be, operators don't want to be undersold, obviously. They don't want competitors to get all the product of a particular brand that they would otherwise carry, so that they don't have the opportunity to participate in the sales in the marketplace. So it's a touchy subject. Okay, retailing. I think this is the last chapter, I hope. So retailing is like the tail end of the value chain. It's what most of us actually think about in business because it's what we see, but they again really don't understand what goes on in the whole, you know, when you flush the toilet, it goes down somewhere and we never see it again, which is what we want. And retail is kind of the same way. When we pull up to the gas station, we just want to get our gas and go. We don't really, every time we do that, most of us at least, don't think about the process that it takes to get it there on an ongoing basis. That is why the whole business environment is far bigger in terms of business and dollars than the actual retail level. But retailing is where it happens. So uh, there's a lot of retailers in the United States, and it's a substantial part of our overall uh, GDP. And there's different kinds of retail operations that are defined by ownership, the level of the service, TJ Maxx versus Nordstrom's or Macy's, uh, product assortment, same, and obviously price. Everyday low prices, expect more, pay less. We know who both of those players are. So one of the things that we're concerned about in setting the price is, again, the margin that uh, we sell it for, which should cover the cost of goods sold and then all of our operating expenses. And normally for much of retail, you sort of have a standard operating formula that you get into that I determined when I had the store in Hawaii. It took me about 6 months to figure out what my average markups had to be so that I covered all my operating expenses and paid myself a reasonable amount of money. Like everybody else, any other kind of business, you want to define your target market and choose a retailing mix. And we know that the retailing mix is now. It's your menu or bouquet of products that you carry in your store. They all have to have a understood sort of shelf life, and I don't mean spoilage, I mean turnover. You should be very sensitive to your average turnover of your retail mix or product mix. So not only does things sit in on the shelf too long for spoilage, but more so that you're not tying up your money for extended lengths of time. So the longer it takes for any given product to sell, the less shelf space you would seemingly give to it. You want to have a good product mix of things that are a fit with your customer. And when you choose this product mix, product, price, place, promotion, also your place and personnel. You have the right people selling it, and you have to have the right location. I hate the term location, 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 but you know, as long as you understand that the location is in fact a fit with your product, sometimes the best location in the sense of Walmart's distribution sites, for example, is out in the middle of the boondocks, as long as it's close to freeway junctions and railroad tracks. So it's a different kind of location than we normally think. Uh, most of us think about marketing, as we said earlier, as just advertising, public relations. That's really your promotional mix that's nested in your overall marketing. And it's particularly important in retail. And again, it's what we see every day. So we think that's pretty much all there is to it. a clever advertisement. Place is where you sell it, and that depends on. I think you had an exercise on Prism. By the way, I have. I can't reset the. I don't know what the problem is with the link in the module, but I did put an active link in one of the news announcements, and if you haven't found it yet, start looking for it. It'll take you to Prism. But anyway, we want to have where Prism is good is it exemplifies the necessary fit between the neighborhood that you intend to locate and the fit with your determined target market, and that user, the customer profile that lives in a given area. You want to make sure they complement one another, obviously. And same thing, you got to go through a number of different locations. You know, is this right for a shopping center? How much am I going to be doing online? Do I really even want to have a brick and mortar? And what are things like zoning restrictions, traffic flows, public transportation, so on and so forth. You want to make sure that you have access to the appropriate worker profile. Sometimes education, for example, is important at some level anyway, and sometimes it isn't. But you want to make sure that regardless that your worker profile is conveniently located to your product relative to what you pay them. And then again, analytics is become very important, and we're able with analytics to construct very accurate profiles in many cases of our customers, our target markets, which can tell us new products and services to develop for them, and how, with sometimes great accuracy, how they are going to relate to these particular products and services. So that is it for marketing.